שלום לכולם, שמי אילן שר, למי שלא יודע אני המנכ"ל של עמותת המאמנים. למעשה היום אנחנו מתחילים את העונה השנייה במרכאות או לא במרכאות של עקרת המאמן, ואני הגעתי היום להיפגש עם אדם יקר שאני חייב להודות, הוא גם אימן אותי באיזשהו שלב, קוראים לו ג'קי. אני לא חושב שהרבה זוכרים אותו, ואני חושב שזה הזמן שכן יזכרו אותו, ובאתי לספר את הסיפור שלו. והשיחה תיארך באנגלית שלא כהרגלנו, ואני אמשיך עם ג'קי. שלום ג'קי.
שלום אילן.
אני אעבור מאחורי המצלמה, ועכשיו everything is yours. Hi Jackie, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Long time since we saw each other.
Yes, it's many years have passed. A lot of water has passed under the bridge since last we crossed paths. So,
and this is one of the reasons that I'm here, because I think that we owe you and we owe tennis to tell your story, and I know that these past years that were not easy for you, you've backed away, and we come here to hear your story. And the conversation, of course, we'll do it in English, and I hope that our viewers would be able to follow. And I will start, if you can tell us, how did you start to play tennis? Where did you play tennis and everything in the beginning?
Well, in the beginning, I had an immediate interest in tennis. I think from the age of about 6 or 7 years, I used to get an old racket and play against our yard wall, hitting balls time and time again on the wall. And eventually, at the age of 8, because I seemed to show flair for the game, I was encouraged by my father to take part in a tournament. And I'll never forget that first tournament. Played against a player by the name of Barry Firstfelt in the first round.
Where? In which
This was in Durban, where I lived. Played on sand courts. And this was, as I say, I was 8 years old. I was going back almost 70 years now. Mm-hmm. And what happened was I actually beat this person very first by 6-love. And what I found out many years later, he became a good friend of mine. He later became one of the most famous South African cricket captains, and he captained South Africa during a time when South Africa was on top of the world in cricket. So that was my introduction to tennis tournaments. And from there, as I said, I just continued playing in tournaments, going through the different age groups right up until the age of about 17, 18. I was never quite one of the best, but I think just through hard work, eventually, I found myself breaking into the top 10 in South Africa, and eventually managing to get into Wimbledon on during 5 different years. So my experience there was certainly something to be cherished, because Wimbledon is the most important and the most famous tournament of all.
And did you manage to pass any round? It wasn't in the juniors, it was in the adults.
Yes, I always played in the open men's events. Yeah. And what the successes I did have were, first of all, I think my best year was 1966. My years of actually playing there were 64, 65, 66, 67 and 70. My best year was 1966, where I happened to beat the Japanese number 1, his name was Ishiguro, in the first round in 5 marathon sets. In the second round, I was very determined to win, because it was just after the 6-day war, and my heart was very much with Israel at that time, being a representative of South Africa. But who should I meet in the second round was El Shefi from Egypt, who at that time was junior Wimbledon. Well, I had another marathon encounter, but being Jewish and coming up against an Egyptian at the time, I felt I had to win, and that was another 5-set marathon in which I beat him. So
you beat him. So you managed to get to the third round.
The third round, and the third round, I think I was exhausted because I was beaten by the French number 1, who at that time was a very well-known top player in the world by the name of Pierre Darman. But anyway, my memories of Wimbledon are the greatest of all the tennis experiences I ever had.
Mm-hmm. And after Wimbledon, or your success in Wimbledon, why did you come to Israel? How come you found yourself in Israel after being...
Well, I think it was the early 1970s. There was a tremendous turbulence that was starting in South Africa. And one day my wife and I decided to go to a movie. And we saw a movie which I think was called Shout at the Devil. And she was terrified after seeing this movie because it showed a little white child being thrown into a fire by Africans. And at that point in time, she said that we must immediately leave. And I immediately started getting into contact with many of my past contemporaries. I wrote to Canada, had a good invitation to Canada. I wrote through John Newcomb to America, had a very good invitation from John Newcomb to open up a new camp in New Braunfels, Texas. And at the same time, I had an invitation from Israel to become national coach. Well, having been to Israel many times before and having liked what I saw, and particularly the people, I thought, well, here we go, let's give it a try. And that's how we ended up in Israel, and we've been here ever since.
Yeah, and before I go into the later stage, the names that you played with when you played really professional or amateur professional, which are the names that you played with?
Well, amongst the best players that I managed to defeat were Ilie Nastase, who at one time I think was number one in the world. Besides that, I beat Bungert, who was a finalist at Wimbledon, German number one. Beat Bob Hewitt, who was at one time number one in South Africa.
The commentator of Eurosport.
Cliff Drysdale, he was also number one. Tom Hocker from Holland, who was well known.
You beat all of them?
So these were the better players, or should I say the best players, where I managed to succeed. And also there was Clark Graebner, who at one stage was American number one, and I managed to beat him in South Africa during one of the international tournaments. Yeah. So
good. It's great names and big names, really. I don't know how many Israelis today can say, not too many, that they beat such a variety of players. But let's go, and I think we are coming to the stage where I met you, because you came to Israel and you were the national coach, and that's the years where I played, and together with Shlomo. But I want you to elaborate or to tell us about it. How did you find it? Because you come from a different mentality, different way of working, because you were a hard worker, I know that, and it was very hard to beat you. You never gave up on anything. But how did you come about the national team? And if you can tell us a little about of these years that you were the national coach.
Well, I must say that I really enjoyed my time as national coach. Traveling with the boys had some very good trips, some fairly successful tournaments that we went to. So generally, I really thoroughly enjoyed the time that I had with the boys and the team. And as I say, traveling to different places, and also the training that we did. Also, apart from getting them fit, I felt that I managed to maintain a reasonable fitness myself during those years. So they were some of the best early years that I can remember in settling in Israel.
Who were the people that you were involved that brought you? Can you tell us the names, or who were you in touch, and who was the team at your days?
The one that initially got me to Israel and told me to come urgently because they desperately needed a national coach was the chairman of the Israeli Federation, who at that time was Avram Feiger. So he was the main person in getting me to immigrate to Israel, which I still remember very well.
And the team that you coached, do you remember the names of all of them, or part of them?
The players that I coached were Elon himself, Chaim Alozerov, Shlomo Glickstein, and then I had all the the lower groups as well. In the lower group there was Amos Mensdorf, there was Gillard Bloom, Shachar Perkis, Tommy Frischer, Ruby Borges. Quite a few of them became doctors. I know Ruby became a doctor, Chaim Lazarov became a doctor, and those were very enjoyable years.
Are you in contact with anyone of during the last years?
Quite a few of them have actually come back to me on Facebook wanting to become friendly, and we have kind of picked up on Facebook from time to time, and the others who I do periodically contact, so it's still very much alive, my connection to the earlier years.
Did you see any, when you were coaching, did you see any difference between what you are used to be or what you used to do and the Israeli mentality or way of coaching, or what was different between the South African views and the Israelis?
Well, I think the main difference is, of course, that every Israeli at that stage had to go into the army, and whether the players were going to get off or whether they weren't going to get off was always something at the back of one's mind. But generally, the coaching at that time, I think Israel generally was in its infancy before they really kind of made huge advances, not only in international tennis but also in the Davis Cup. That was the kind of seeds were there that were being sown for much greater expectations, which eventually materialized.
And do you remember the ties that you participated in Davis Cup? Which countries do?
Well, the very first country that Israel participated in that I certainly remember was against Austria, where I think quite a lot of the officials at that time were not very aware of the behavior that was needed for such an encounter. First of all, I remember going into the interview room in Jerusalem, where the top player that we'd actually had at that time, Steve Krulowitz from America, was interviewed, who at that time I felt was playing brilliant tennis, was interviewed and asked why he played so badly in the doubles. To my way of thinking, even though they lost the doubles, he was the best player on the court. So that, for a start, was very poor lack of knowledge from that point of view. From the point of view of linesmen, I never ever forget one of the important matches which Shlomo Glickstein was playing against the Austrian number one, where he had a very, very close encounter with the Austrian number one during a ferocious match, where when things reached the height of the game, of the match that was being played, suddenly one of the linesmen, who I won't name, jumped up and started applauding when Glickstein hit a shot, which was something I'd never seen on a tennis court before.
We all know him, and we will leave it like this. Yeah.
So that stands out very clearly in my mind, something which was absolutely hilarious at the time. So that was my main encounter with the team. And then I went on a number of trips with some of the junior teams and also some of the girls' teams. I remember a wonderful trip that did with the Israeli national girls team to Madrid, where I had a wonderful encounter meeting a lot of my contemporaries and also seeing the girls participate against the world's best. So those were some of my best experiences regarding the times that I had with the national teams.
And how did it end? You were the coach of the team, and suddenly you were not, at least from my point of view.
Well,
so what happened there?
I felt at a certain point in time that I was far better off coaching privately, because I think the salary that I was earning at the time from the Israeli Tennis Association was so poor that we're not really able to make ends meet, in spite of the fact that I'd been promised a lot before coming to Israel by the association. I felt that I was far better off teaching in a private capacity, and that's how I had no hesitation in eventually leaving and becoming the head coach at the Acadia Hotel, where I remained for the rest of my coaching career.
Which was, how many years did you do that?
Well, I started in 1978 and I ended through heart problems in the year 2010. So I had a fairly successful coaching career.
And since then, what have you been doing?
Well, since then I've gone back to my childhood hobby, which is buying and selling stamps on eBay, which I find a very fascinating hobby. Connecting with a lot of pen pals, connecting with a lot of pen pals, making friends with people all over the world, and also just learning a tremendous amount what is behind the collecting of stamps, which is really a most fascinating hobby. So that at the moment is my main interest. Apart from that, I still have tremendous interest in other sports like soccer, rugby, cricket.
You watch tennis?
Tennis to a lesser extent, funnily enough. I'm only really interested when it comes to tennis and the Grand Slam tournaments. Apart from that, I think I've played and seen too much tennis in the past to really follow the way I'm following other sports at the moment.
And finally, if you see the Israeli tennis today and what's going on, if you follow it, what are your insight or your views about it? It can be that
well,
you don't have
my feelings are that Israel does not have the professional body to actually handle the best of the talent that is coming out of Israel at the moment. Other countries have become extremely streamlined in their ways of looking after and training players, and as I say, tennis at the moment has reached a level that has never ever been seen before. And as I said, I think Israel still has a long way to go to catch up, because these countries are producing players, particularly from the East European countries, that really feel that it's a wonderful way of earning a living. Some of them are today millionaires, and I think from that aspect, I think the training abroad is far, far more professional than it is in Israel. I think also they have the capabilities of paying big money to a lot of these coaches and trainers and therapists that go along with the players to enable players to become so successful.
So Jackie, what can I say? First of all, I will thank you for this interview, really, and for taking the time to talk to me and to us, all the coaches. I hope they will learn. I apologize for the English, but I think it goes through better. And what I can say is really, good health, keep well, keep on the spirits that you have, and I wish you, as I said, all well.
Well, I wish you all the best as well, Elon. It's been a wonderful reunion after so many years, and I wish you good health and all the best for the future years to come.
Thank you very much.
As I say in Israel, Admei Esrim.
The same to you. תודה רבה. Thank you.
Okay.